All right, everybody, welcome back to the Occasional Barista. We are joined now, of course, we have Chris McColl still here with us, and we're now joined by two of our friends. If you want to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Diem. I'm not a barista, just a normal.
And like, how many years in the industry have you been?
It's been like around 3 years and a half now.
3 years and a half within the industry, and then what was your last position?
So I used to be manager at Seven Seas Roasting Company, location in Aliso Viejo. 1 week ago. Like
1 week ago.
Now
still
I'm
fresh.
Still fresh.
Yeah,
still
I'm still
fresh.
fresh.
I was thinking the exact same thing, and of course
Hasn't even degassed.
Still blooming.
Nice.
barista jokes.
Barista dad jokes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Jordan.
Yeah, my name is Jordan Rabé, and I am just getting my feet wet in the coffee industry, actually, with Chris, and he's bringing me on with at Little Lunch Coffee, and I am starting as one of the managers there. So.
Yeah, so it's really nice, and I feel like we have, of course, a bunch of different people here now with different stages of their, experience with coffee, of course, and I think that's really going to give some insights in regards to, again, some of the things that we may have even forgotten when we first started, getting into coffee, that honestly, even for people who've been in the coffee industry 5, 10, 20 years, might even sometimes forget that once somebody brings it up who has a very fresh perspective on it will definitely enlighten even the most experienced and elite people. So we really want to kind of give Jordan a chance to kind of ask any questions that he might have, and I'm sure it will relate to a lot of you listening.
Yeah, I guess as far as questions go, Chris was kind of saying this earlier. He's been one of my greatest resources, as you guys could probably argue as well, correct? And he was just mentioning how he's kind of talked my ear off, and definitely has been just feeding me lots of resources and just kind of honestly answering all the questions that I may already have as far as what to pick up for taste, even dialing an espresso, for instance. We've been doing some behind bar training, which has been the very first time I've actually been behind bar, and also knowing what recipes to follow and what taste notes to look for. And as far as that, just experiencing stuff, trying stuff out, tasting. For instance, Chris has been wonderful as far as doing, home roasting stuff, or just making a pour over at my house. He's actually listed out in a note within his iPhone as far as how to bloom.
Whole brew guide, yeah.
Whole brew guide, and also made it really fun too, not just like step by step. Also threw in some comedic humor, like
I'm sure.
He's all start playing Ice Cube's "Today Was a Good Day," and just little things like that,
Helps
and also
set the tone.
making it fun for me, which I feel like when you are going into whatever job that is, you should enjoy what you're doing.
Of course.
Chris has slowly showed me what community and what an environment, stable work environment should be when you are getting into something, especially this new field of coffee, which is for myself.
I would say, and especially something that you brought up, that is like for you going and having someone like Chris, like when you're going and he's talking you through tastings and he's talking to you about like processes behind bar, what has been like a couple of the most like surprising things for you that you would have never suspected before, and about tasting even, coffee in general?
I guess just overall, just changing my mindset of what coffee is. Let me just go back. I guess what Chris was talking about, his introduction into coffee. I guess everyone has their own perspective or experience. Mine was Folgers from my parents.
There we go.
Folgers, best part of waking up, right?
That classic air.
Exactly. And so that was my, I guess, introduction into coffee, making coffee for my parents. Like, just throw some teaspoons in that coffee filter, this much water, pour that in, press start, serve me that cup of coffee when it's ready.
Yeah.
And that's what I grew up what coffee was to me. And as a kid, yes, it smells good, but when you taste it, like, it tastes like tar. This is something that I don't really genuinely like. And then I guess just growing up, going to college, which is where I heavily was relying on coffee and caffeine, changed my perspective as far as what coffee should be like and what it should taste like, or at least what I will think what coffee should taste like. And I guess come to now learning a lot from Chris, getting to go behind bar and also just making coffee. Sorry, my perspective is tasting coffee without having to add in more to it. For instance, I feel like in college I was just throwing in your coffee mate creamer with a little dash of coffee, you know what I mean? Just because I felt like I was so familiar with sweet coffee just from Starbucks, you know, getting a Frappuccino, getting a mocha. And I finally came to the consensus that I was kind of tired of a mocha. So,
in Slow, you had a lot of, I think there's like a good chunk of specialty shops too, right? So like you already had exposure. So he was aware that there's other things he could try and like stuff out there.
Exactly. And when I was going to college, I was studying and frequenting all these small coffee shops. Scout Coffee was one of them. Linnaeus Cafe. There's one blanking right now. But anyways, there's just a whole hub of craft coffee, and I saw the amount of work that the baristas were putting in and saw all these specialty drinks, and I was curious. Other than having just my normal mocha, I would ask the barista, I'm like, hey, what's something that you like? Basically, like dealer's choice. Can you make me something that you think I would enjoy? They'd ask what I was familiar with, and I'd give them some input, and they would give me something. And for the most part, I always enjoyed it, and that's where I kind of built that culture within that. I'll just say Scout Coffee. I frequented Scout Coffee a lot.
The first time I met Jordan, I served him an espresso. And so like he had already been on that journey, I feel, now that we're talking about it. He like came into a Yosa, said, hey, can I get a shot of espresso? And do you have any sparkling water? And I was like, whoa, who are you?
Who's this guy?
Yeah, so like he was already moving on it. And I think even Allie was there at the time, and I think even she had said like, oh yeah, this is Jordan, and he's been trying like coffee and wants to see what you guys have. And and so it was funny, like I'm like, oh, somebody that's familiar, this is like great, and it was a great opportunity. And
at least he's isn't afraid of it.
A
lot of people have that fear and intimidation of espresso because they think it's such like this overpowering, robust, like in your face flavor. So honestly, it's funny.
But it is though. I think that's something that we encounter is like there's a lot of bad coffee being made, and that's what your perception is, right? Like growing up with Folgers makes sense because that's all that was. You know? Yeah, your status quo.
Yeah, so it's funny you bring that up. I was just trying to experiment things, and obviously if people are drinking espresso, there's something to it, right?
Yeah.
Even specialty drinks, like someone's going to make this recipe for this to provide an experience for someone, and I'm open for these experiences, and I like the engagement, and also I like learning new things. And I come from a martial arts background. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I like having that white belt perspective of just being a sponge and learning things and trying things out for what they are and trying to match that experience and just picking up things that I think is different, or just trying to, like I said, trying to match that experience, bring out taste those flavors that is on that bag, or what Chris is explaining, and learning. Being a white belt.
How long ago were you that you first had that experience at San Luis Obispo? You said what was the coffee shop that you frequented? Scout Coffee, right? And it's interesting to hear which is super it's it's so nice to hear that you actually had a good experience with baristas. You're open enough to go and say, hey, help me out, I'm just really curious about coffee.
Sure.
And they were able to help you out just by you giving a few inputs of what your taste was at. And I think that's, again, it of course counters what Chris was talking about, his experience at Portola, which might have been a little bit more intimidating.
Yeah.
But what was the timeline on that?
That was 2013.
Which is interesting.
Right when that coffee shop was fairly new too, and had just lots of great aesthetics that I really enjoyed. So I was curious, had my backpack and all my books and stuff, and I just stumbled upon in, and I'm pretty sure I got a mocha.
And were you ever intimidated by specialty coffee or baristas, or not particularly?
Not necessarily. I think that's just me. That's my personality. I like.
He's disarming.
I'm a curious person. I'm not afraid to ask, and or I don't have shame in failing at things or asking people may say dumb questions, but
Yeah.
I feel like there isn't necessarily a dumb question if you have intention of what you're asking.
Yeah, good intentions and
Yeah.
wanting, and like I think, See, and I wish I was more like you when I first got into coffee, because I was actually intimidated as well trying to get into specialty coffee at first, just because I knew of Aosa, the place I've eventually wound up going to and working, right? But I was so afraid and overthinking of what I'm gonna order. I looked up like all these things in regards to like, all right, what do baristas choose, and what's the like coffee choice for baristas? And I looked online, it was cappuccino, and I remember like the first time in, I quickly was like didn't even let the guy say like, oh hi, how's it going? I was like, oh, can I have one cappuccino please? Like just like cutting them off.
Oh, that was my experience, because like
Yeah.
cappuccino is just the word that's associated with coffee.
And
So,
how many cappuccinos did I drink when I was a barista? Like 0. So that's just one of those things. And I hated it too. And I was like, when I first got into it, and I was like, this is specialty coffee. It still doesn't taste great. But, and I'm also curious, Diem, were you ever intimidated getting into coffee? Because you have quite a different background than us in regards to being in Vietnam, at least for a bit. And then...
I was born and raised in Vietnam, like straight up a coffee country, but I actually never like been into that kind of like coffee, because we mostly like drink a lot like black coffee in the south. You know, condensed milk and coffee is the north thing.
Oh.
So it's super black, like strong black coffee where I live, like Saigon. So, but I never into it because they consider like in the culture like kid cannot drink coffee. So my parents never let me try anything. But I started like in college, like senior year, not even like before that. So I just like Jordan, I drink just to leave with the like pull all nighter for studying, like drip coffee straight up, cream and sugar and stuff. But then I wander around a lot of like from Portland. I live in Portland for 7 years.
Yeah.
And then that's the heart of like specialty coffee, that as people say.
Yeah.
And I wander around all the coffee shops just to get a place to stay there, the vibe, and then study Wi-Fi and stuff.
Yeah.
But the blade that got me into this kind of like specialty coffee is Barista.
The baristas.
Yeah. They like, I found like they really cool looking, like all Barista wear aprons, all they button up, like just like professional like people.
Yeah.
And like how they like run the machine and stuff. I'm like, dude, how can they do that? Like, it looks so cool. So I'm really like talking to them and stuff. They're cool too. Then I started like graduate and moved to California, which I felt like, wow, they have specialty coffee. Like maybe I can try it. My plan was going PhD for my major, but then I'm like, maybe it's not for me. I want more socialize with people, and I realize how barista in this industry like interact with people, which I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So
and it was no intimidation, but a barista though is really what kind of sparked your interest in coffee.
Yeah.
Getting that conversation.
I mean, like
with it.
I was scared, like going like, what should I order? Maybe I look stupid if I ask. You know,
So
like like.
can-
I don't want to just order random stuff and then like you don't know what latte is, what cappuccino. I actually don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Yeah, that's what you gotta look.
And you come to find everyone does it differently,
Yeah.
and that's a struggle too. It's definitely interesting to hear that everyone has such a different experience.
Well, it was a barista for me that finally opened the door for even Aosa. His name was Aaron Dwarf, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now he's over. Last time I checked, it was Hopper and Burr.
Right.
But yeah, this is a guy who basically like he was one of the first baristas that like really made me feel welcomed, and I was like, that's such a relief for somebody who's intimidated.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't feel like I was talked down to. Just he's like a classic surfer kid at the time. You know, and it was like really that was the guy. And honestly, too, it wasn't even like he did that much. It was just him just being like a genuine human being. You know, and like. I felt comfortable. After that, you couldn't get me out of Aosa, as Chris found out, you know.
I had
Like
to offer him
seeing-
a job for him to want to leave that place.
Exactly.
I can tell like in the past, like maybe 2017, around that time, like it's really hard to have like good conversation, like have barista actually open up to you first, just to
Yeah.
talk.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
like, I always talk about this with Allie, my girlfriend who I met through AOSA, because as someone who was in a management position and I was running the social media, like, there were a lot of attractive girls I would have loved to interact with over the bar, but like, there's a certain like professional aspect that I carried with myself. So like, she teases me that I worked there for years and like never really overtly hit on her. I was like, I didn't want to be that creepy barista. Like I thought that's the
Strictly
thing that I should be
professional.
avoiding. Yeah.
Strictly.
So I mean, I think there was a small handful of people that I can probably count on one hand that I actually had real genuine conversations with that became friends.
Yeah.
And it's just because I wasn't as open to that. I didn't necessarily want to expose myself in that setting because I was like, obviously scared of judgment, but also wanted to keep that professional edge and not like be like, oh yeah, I love to like play video games and smoke weed. It's not what every person wants to hear.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to put that tone out there as, like I said, somebody in management. So I think as much as it is your job to give an experience and to culture that welcoming environment, it can be really tough to do too. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that for me was I was not in like what my like home or like my resting place was, so to speak, with AOSA. Like it just wasn't the shop for me.
Yeah.
So made it difficult to connect with more people there.
I think it's interesting too how you say like as a manager you have certain like standards to kind of uphold, but to even kind of go to somebody who's like gonna just be starting off to like just how about just a barista, like how would you define barista, like how would you define their tasks, their responsibilities, like what is a barista to you, even just like in the sense of the term?
Yeah, that changed for me a lot.
Yeah.
It really changed for me after my experience with Coffee Dose too. I definitely thought I took such an approach early on that you have to serve great coffee. Like that was the primary focus. Mm-hmm. Whatever you do, someone's paying for a service and you need to deliver on that service. And that service doesn't necessarily have to include the experience. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean I like welcomed or invited or participated in like a pretentiousness behind the bar like I've experienced. But I wasn't going out of my way to just give a great experience first and foremost, which I think is the real seller. Mm-hmm. Like when you talk about Aaron Dorff, Mike, the owner of AOSA, used to talk so much about Aaron Dorff.
Yeah.
And I think it was that experience. He left such lasting impressions on people, including Mike. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I was always confused by it because I knew I made the better cup of coffee. Yeah. Like I knew I had more experience and more training, and at the time probably just had access to better coffees. Yeah. And I would serve that to Mike and be like, why are you not more impressed with what this is and what I've done here? And that had come around full circle after Coffee Dose, where I realized there was actually a lot of value in Coffee Dose where we'd have people who had no interest in coffee, only interest in the branding, but we could sell them good coffee, and then they'd be like, oh, well, I paid $10 for a pretty latte that actually was good. Yeah. Like, I'm actually starting to like coffee, or they would ask questions. So, like, that branding and the experience that we were trying to give, albeit one that was required and not necessarily as natural, was still like disarming people and like knocking down barriers. And so that was really cool. And so I think my perspective has changed a lot in that it is all about experience. Like you can almost also push whatever your agenda is, whether it's like educating people about coffee, educating people about the barista struggle, wanting to push your own agenda in terms of like, hey, I also do art, check out my art. Like you want to connect with people or network with people. I think first and foremost, it starts with an experience. Yeah. Like if you can create a memorable experience, a positive experience, that's a hard thing that people, like other businesses, can't always replicate, So that's what's going to make you the most unique. So yeah, I think that's the pivotal thing that I would look for. Like I said, I definitely think paying respect to the coffee and providing a good product is huge, because anyone that makes a bad cup of coffee is unfortunately like tainting the industry in a sort of way. But it's the experience, man. Yeah. It's about being a person.
Jordan, would you like, not that this, he might have biased you now in regards to your answer now, don't let him bias you, but coming in too, because like again, you've had experience in the service industry before, and I think it might be interesting to hear again your fresh perspective in regards to what a barista is. And again, if it's the same thing, because I agreed a lot with what Chris said, for sure, 100%. But just kind of going into like, what's the difference too between like a barista's job and responsibilities and who a barista is versus like a waiter, like a waiter or service. I think there are such different things. but we're all trying to achieve again the same good goal of
Right.
customer experience, really.
Yep.
But what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll just start my experience in the service industry. I've worked at a deli all throughout college. When I moved to San Luis Obispo, I worked at a deli called Gus's Grocery, and I went in there as just a normal sandwich maker, usually closing shifts, but and throughout that I just learned about customer service and customer experience, and kind of climbed up that small business ladder into management pretty quickly, and ended up working there physically for about 8 years.
Okay.
8 years
There
making
you go.
sandwiches,
Yeah.
and all while going to college and also working other jobs. I also worked at a restaurant called Slow Brew, which was a restaurant and also a brewery, and also a little nightlife club at night.
Okay.
Just in Slow for the college town that it was.
Yeah. So quite the array. Of
Yeah,
service
quite the
industry
array. Also
jobs.
working like physical therapy too, where
Yeah.
I was just working with patients hands-on, and also creating experiences, because I really value people's time, and
Yeah.
people will, for instance, coming into a physical therapy session for like an hour of their time, and I want to make sure their time there is useful and somewhat memorable. If I can make that experience a little bit better, why not?
Yeah.
And I guess that comes into being now a barista. Like, you want to create that experience. People are going to come into your spot first thing in the morning, and if you could set that standard for them to have a good day, and also deliver a really great product and build that experience and that community for them to come back, I feel that's like a really beautiful thing to have.
Yeah, there was an experience I have that I always recollect, because it's been like a principle that I want to teach to other baristas getting into coffee. But when I was at Coffee Dose, there was an experience where one of our regulars came in. I was already starting to drink before she came in. I was working with one of the owners behind the bar that time, doing some training with them.
Yeah.
And I hadn't worked with this specific owner that much. So they, what I was doing was definitely new to them in a lot of ways. Yeah. And as soon as she had come in, it started raining like hard out of the blue, just pouring. And I already knew it was kind of wet. I brought an umbrella to work. I made her a drink, and I was like, hey, let me walk you out to your car. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, yeah, no, it's like raining. I'll just help you into your car. And like, don't overthink it. Like, let's go. So I walked her out, and my boss, the owner, was so shocked that he was recording me do this. And when I came back in, I was shocked that he was shocked. I was like, really? That was so out of the ordinary and like such a special thing? I was like, I'm just taking care of my people.
Yeah.
Like, she comes in every day. She brings her husband in every day. They're in on the weekends.
Yeah.
They tip. They spend money. Like, she's part of our community, our tribe. So I was taking care of her. But I really assimilated that to like anyone that comes in the shop. Like, you have this opportunity, this responsibility as a barista to start someone's day or someone's week. Like, if let's say you work in an office job 9 to 5 and it's miserable, and the one thing you look forward to is your coffee, to get your day started and make it through. And a barista screws that up for you.
Yeah.
Like, that could put you on tilt for the entire day, the entire week.
Yeah.
That could change how you interact with people. So I think there is a huge responsibility as a barista to like create that awesome experience, to foster that community, to like do all those good things, because it actually has a bigger impact than you know.
Yeah.
And so I spreading kindness and all that kind of stuff kind of plays into that mentality. But I think that's where you can set yourself apart as a barista and really elevate that experience.
Diem, you want to add anything about this topic on what your beliefs on being a barista is and what a barista should be doing?
For me, just like barista, just like chef or like pastry chef, like the people want to like connect and serve the customer, or like customer is just another friend,
Yeah.
through food, through coffee, through pastry they make, and especially like just like Chris said, you're the first one to start a day and maybe end a day too.
Yeah.
So no matter how your day is, you need to like always positive to make your customer like day better too.
Yeah. So I think barista jobs are actually more difficult than you anticipate. I
It's
mean,
more
you've got to be
emotional.
on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put your own stuff aside and show up for other people, essentially.
But what I think is fascinating, and again, I agree with everything that you guys said, but at the core of it all, like really no one else really talked about coffee.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like being a barista is
coffee's the vessel.
is all about people, and what's so sad is that you see today, like many people get that feeling that baristas are only about coffee, not the customer experience.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying every shop, and I'm saying again, luckily I feel like we've slowly but surely been able to change most people's minds about baristas, just based off of like seeing again like our own experiences making great connections, you know, really having it. But for the people who might, you know, look at being a barista as like, again, I admit I was at fault for just romanticizing coffee as just it's all about this craft. You don't care about like when I first thought about being a barista, not once did I think about the customer.
Yeah,
like yeah, 150%. Not once did when I was romanticizing about being a barista was I like, and I get to meet all these people and I get to serve all these people drinks and their lattes. No. But leaving, and honestly, like, which I'm honestly, besides this whole podcast, but for me, when I left Aosa Coffee, and I thought I'm gonna leave the coffee industry for good now. I'm not gonna ever like be a barista. Honestly, knock on wood. We'll see what happens, you know, type of thing. But the only thing I really thought about was the connections I made, and that's really what ties a lot of baristas to shops. Is because of, again, we meet how many hundreds of thousands of people within our community. Like Chris said, they become your community. He even said tribe. You know. Yeah. And that was like the hardest thing for me, just thinking, wow, I might like never see some of these people who I've created great connections with. Luckily, you know, through social media, I can stay connected with the ones who I really formed a bond with. But in reality, it's just one of those things. And when I heard customers leaving, like, hey, I'm about to move, I'm so bummed. I'm like, dude, I'm bummed. You helped my day every time you came in. You were a person I looked forward to serving. Right. And I think that's just like such like a testament to what a barista really is.
Yeah,
you know?
No, absolutely. And so it's crazy too. Like anytime I've left jobs like that where I foster those communities, it was tough.
Yeah.
Like the toughest thing for me about leaving Coffee Dose was like telling all the people, all the regulars at between two locations that I was done and they wouldn't be able to find me there anymore until I moved on to my next project. And that, like, it sounds crazy, but that was a big thing that held me back from quitting. Yeah. So I was like, I actually have created like this community here, and like these people rely on me, in a sense, as their caffeine dealer, and yeah, you know, it was really tough to swallow that and tell people. I mean, I know a lot of people would have been like, oh, you know, good, like, best of luck, whatever goes on, like I'll follow you or help you or support you, whatever. But it was still tough to like break up that thing that we had created, you know, breaking up the band essentially. Yeah. And I'm actually really grateful. A lot of people followed me from Aosa, you know, and still follow me from Coffee Dose at this point. You know, heck, even you guys are testaments to that, really. Yeah.
And waiting on little lunch.
That's
Get it
exactly
open.
what's been happening to me like the last week, like just 1 week since I left 7C. I'm like, I have to text every single customer that I'm like have a relationship with. I'm like, yo, I'm not there yet anymore, but support them. But we're friends for life. Yeah. They like whatever you do, tell us. We're gonna come to support. I'm like, I'm so grateful. Like people change us. Yeah. Because we changed them too.
Yeah.